Hi there, this is a test to show you some of the ways you can use to model a garbage can. This is a great test exercise to figure out edit poly. We are going to make this garbage can here. I'm going to show you how to make the body, and then you can work on your own to try and make the lid. So we're going to start off using a cylinder. I always recommend you create things in your top-down view. So one drag for how big it is, and let go and click again to make the overall size. Now I'm going to be working largely in the perspective view for the rest of this video. Our cylinder has been made. It's now time to go into the modify panel, and we're going to play with the parameters a little bit. Right now our cylinder is a little polygonal. You can see all the sides. It doesn't look very smooth, so we're gonna right away bump that up to 32, make it a little bit smoother. We're also going to make sure that we've got one cap segment changed to 2, so that we've actually got some top detail on our garbage can. That's it for the basic parameters of the cylinder. We're now going to take and start using a new modifier called the taper modifier. Taper modifier is a lot like the bend modifier you've probably seen before, and what it lets us do is it just lets us taper the cylinder a little bit, because garbage cans aren't perfectly a perfect cylinder. So I'm just going to add just a slight taper on that garbage can, just to give it a little bit of a bigger top and a smaller bottom, so somewhere in there. I'll leave that up to you. You don't have to match my settings exactly. We're going for overall look of the object. Once that is done, we're going to add another modifier, and this is the big one, edit poly. This is the modifier that when you're making things in 3D Studio you will spend 99% of your time using. The better you get at using the different buttons and doing things with edit poly, the better modeler you're going to be. So I'm going to start off by selecting some polygons to actually make the inside where the garbage goes, because right now it's not a very useful garbage can. So all I'm going to do is just hold down my control button and just select all the inner polygons here. There is a shortcut for this, but to be honest, I forget it half the time, and it takes me more time to figure it out than just to select them. And it's good practice. Just make sure that every time you click, something turns red. You don't want to accidentally, and it's always a good idea to rotate around your object to make sure you didn't accidentally grab something back here and you don't see it. Control lets you add, Alt lets you take away from your selection. So they've got the top part ready to go. Now if I was just to extrude that down, again it's a bit of a weird looking garbage can. It's got this sort of little hole in it compared to the overall size of it. So I'm going to switch to my select and scale, and I'm going to make sure I scale right in the middle of the triangle. I don't want to scale one of these particularly. I want to get all 3 of them. So I'm just going to scale that up a little bit so we create a more reasonable opening for our garbage can. You don't want to go too much, because we're going to have issues when we go to extrude it down. So I don't know, something that looks about like that. Again, you don't have to match my exact settings. We're just going for an overall look. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my extrude. It's not a modifier, it's just a setting in Edit Poly. Now I'm not going to click on the word extrude, I'm going to click on the button beside extrude, because I like having the pop-up here because there's different settings we can play with, and it gives you a bit more of a visual representation of what's going on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to drag that down, and you'll actually see that the inside of my garbage can goes down. Now what you need to be careful of, because we tapered it, the top is bigger than the bottom. So it actually, if you're not careful, will start to bust through. Now there's lots of ways we can fix that, but for this assignment, just move it down till it's not busting through. So right about there. Sure, it creates a big bottom, but you know what? We're not going to see that. Again, for your first assignment, trying to keep things easy. So just down sort of like that, and it's not actually coming out and wrecking the bottom of our garbage can. So I'm going to hit plus and I'm going to accept that. I'm happy with the look of that. So now I've got it starting to get there. It's still not a garbage can, but it's getting there. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work on this top piece here that comes out a little bit. Then we'll go on to the handle. So I'm going to sort of start by once again selecting all of the polygons along the outside. Just holding down Control. You can't do something like this because we're going to get the inner ones, and we don't want the inner ones. We only want the outside face. So it's a bit tedious, but like I said, it's good practice. Make sure that when you click, something turns red. If you click and something doesn't turn red, you probably accidentally selected something you didn't mean to. Like I said, there are shortcuts to this, but at your level, we want to keep it simple. So that's the top part, and as I said, that's going to be sort of this top part of the garbage can where it comes out. It's mostly just to make it look pretty, but we want to try and match our reference as close as possible. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our friend Extrude that we've used before. Now first, as soon as you click Extrude, weird stuff is going to happen because it remembers the last settings you used. So we're just going to bring that back down to 0. You can actually highlight it and enter in 0 if you want. What we want to do is we actually want to extrude it out, not up. So as I start to extrude, you're going to see, again, it does weird stuff. That's because it's extruding by the group normals. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull down and go to local normals. And then what you're going to see happens when you pull this down and pick local normals is it actually starts to come out. So we're going to extrude that out just a little bit. Again, it's a subtle thing that we see in the garbage can. It's not like it comes out a lot, but there is a definite lip there. We won't worry about this little bump for now. We're just going to deal with that lip. So that's kind of what we're going for. I'm happy with that. I'm going to hit OK. Now comes the more complicated part. We need to start making a handle. Now these handles they're a crazy shape. It's a tough shape to make, to be honest, especially for your first real thing. But we're going to try and come close and keep it fairly simple. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off, and these handles are tough to see, but they're not very wide. This part here, they're definitely not as wide as one of these. So what I'm going to do, if we just selected, I'm going to go to the front of my object too, just so I kind of know where I'm located. If we just selected like this and extruded them out, we'd have really big fat handles that wouldn't match our reference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually switch to the edge selection, and I'm going to grab this one here and just move it over a little bit so that we're creating a bit of a narrower space for our handle to come out. And I'm going to grab this one and move it over that way a little bit. Now you'll also notice if you rotate up that it is doing some weird things along top. And again, there's ways to fix that. But for your first one, we're just going to go back and just adjust it a little bit so it kind of stays in. It's not a big deal for what we're doing. It's kind of flattened it off, which looks cool. So now what that's given us is it's given us a more logical place to bring our handles out, and our handles are thinner like the handles on here. So again, we're going to go back to extrude, and we want to actually extrude group normals. In this one, it doesn't really make a big difference. Normally, you're always going to extrude group normals, except when you did that last operation that we did. So I'm going to extrude out these handles here. Now, you'll notice one that they're sort of coming out a bit of an angle. We can fix that. And we don't want to come out too far. Like we've got about like that. So I would say that amount's probably decent to make our first part of the handle. So again, I'm going to hit OK. Not picking an exact setting, just kind of playing around. Now, I'm not particularly happy with, especially this guy's coming out on quite an angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of pull, let me just select one at a time. I'm going to grab this face here, and I'm just going to try and pull him straight a little bit. Now you'll notice again, he's on a bit of an angle, so you can actually just rotate that face. We're just going to try and square those up a little bit so they kind of come straight out. So again, all I do is I select that, and I can move it over a little bit so it's not coming quite so weirdly out. But then when I move it, I get this sort of weird angle on there. And to get rid of that angle, I just rotate that face. So we've got something that looks a little bit more like the handle. They come pretty much straight out. And I'm good with that. So now we need to bring out the lower part of this, but if we just extrude again, we're going to extrude a whole part out here again. So we need to kind of make a cut here, or a division in this polygon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to edge again, and I'm going to select this edge. I'm going to hold control. I'm going to select this edge, and this edge. So I'm actually getting all four of those outside edges. The other way to cheat that, if you want, is just to do a selection like that, and that'll get the four edges. Be really careful you don't do something like this. We don't want those top pieces highlighted. We only literally want the four front faces highlighted. Then we're going to use a new thing to you, and it's called Connect. And again, I'm going to pick the settings button beside Connect. I'm not just going to click the word Connect. And you'll see what that does is we connect it with one segment, it adds a new segment. So it's taken this one long polygon and cut it in half. The other cool thing is we can actually slide that up and down. So I'm going to slide it probably, I don't know, about there. It's a little bit low, a little bit less than half. And I'm going to hit OK. So now I've got two new spots, two new polygons that I can select by clicking and holding control and clicking that. So now you can probably guess what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to extrude again, and I'm going to extrude that out. So now we're making that part that comes out there. And yeah, ours isn't pretty and rounded, but it's going to look close enough by the time we're done with it. So you know what? I'm probably pretty good with the amount that it came out. I think I'll dial it back a little bit here. Let's go maybe there. And I'm going to hit OK to select that. So now I've got this sort of notch coming out. And that's great. That's the top part of the handle, but we don't actually have anything to hold on to. We can't lift that garbage can yet. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select this face, rotate around, hold control and select that face. So I got these two inner faces looking at each other highlighted, and I'm going to use a new one called Bridge. Again, I'm going to click the settings button beside Bridge, and Bridge is one of those modifiers, you know, it's probably going to work the first time, and if it's not, you haven't done something right. So there's not really much we have to worry about in here, aside from clicking OK, assuming the two, see how those two connected? Now we've actually got a garbage can handle. We hit OK, and now we've got the startings of our handle for our garbage can. So we can sort of look at that, and yeah, we're getting close. It's not incredibly pretty. We can tweak it a little bit, but it's getting there. So what next thing we can do is I'm going to work on the top of this handle a little bit, and you'll see right now there's two vertices here and two vertices over here. Again, I want to select those vertices so I can hit Control and go 1, 2, 3, 4. Or again, I can cheat it. I can sort of line them up and just drag a box around all of them. And now I'm going to move those guys back in. And you're going to notice it goes a little bit weird here. These guys aren't perfectly lined up, but it definitely gives us a bit more of a look of the handles that they have. So what I'm probably going to do now is just grab these two separately and just kind of just move them around and play with them a little bit. We could even go in what we did before and just even rotate them just a little bit, just so they kind of line up and are even there. And then we got to go to its buddy over here because again, they're a little bit weird. So this guy and this guy, we're going to rotate those first. Then we're going to just push them in a little bit. Ah, they're probably pretty good. And that one's, move it up a little bit too. So we're starting to get the overall shape of our garbage can handle there. Now I think, now that I look at this, I made this too thick through here. I think this piece is too thick. So instead of redoing it, again, the great thing with Edit Poly, I'm going to highlight all these top vertices, so I've got all of them, and then all I do is just move them down a little bit. I think that makes a better handle than the way it was before. So that's basically your handle. That's the basics of the handle. Now, I want to take and tweak my handle a little bit. It's still a little boxy for what we're doing. So what I'm going to do, and this is again something in the Edit Poly modifier here, I'm going to switch to Edge, and I'm going to use something called Chamfer. What Chamfer does, it's great for rounding off harsh edges, because if we look at this garbage can, all of these edges are rounded. They've got nice round edges on them. So we're going to use a thing called chamfer, and we're going to try and round these off a little bit. Now chamfer works really good on outside edges. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this guy. I'm going to hold control. I'm going to grab this one, this one, this one. That's all the outside edges. Now I'm going to grab the inside edges of the same piece. Like that. But you'll notice I'm not grabbing these guys. We don't want to chamfer the inside part. You'll see why in a second. It'll make sense to you. But I've basically gone all the way around the outside and the inside and made them red. Now I'm going to click again on the chamfer settings button. And I'm going to adjust it a little bit. Chamfer is one of those things that needs to be played with a little bit. But you see what chamfer does, if I turn it to 0 here, and I just start sort of clicking it up a little bit, chamfer takes and it rounds the edges a little bit for you. So it just knocks off those sharp edges and makes them look a little bit rounder. Depending on the situation, sometimes you need to go with the big chamfer. If you go too big, things go crazy. So you don't want to, because we've got a thin area here, you want to keep it fairly small. And if that's not rounding it off enough for you, it's kind of a harsh edge there, you can add another segment in, or 2 segments. And that'll sort of, again, round that off for you. So I'm going to hit OK to that chamfer. And if I clear that, you see it just kind of adds some more detail and it just looks cooler. We could do the same with the bottom of the garbage can. We grab that guy, all the way around the outside here, holding control each time I'm clicking. There we go. And again, I'm going to hit my chamfer settings. It's going to remember the last chamfer settings we had, which actually work really good for this. And I'm going to hit OK. So now we've got what looks like a pretty cool little handle. It's got some nice rounding on it, some more detail in it. Often we're going. Another area that we could chamfer is this outside edge here. So I'll show you a little shortcut. Although, you know what? We're not going to chamfer that till you do the other handle. You got to do the other handle still. So we'll leave that edge. I'll chamfer the bottom one here because this one really, again, it helps you sort of show what chamfer does. So I'm going to click here, and then holding, here's a shortcut I'll show you, holding control down, if I double click on the next edge, it's actually going to highlight that whole edge loop around there. So again, I could go around and click every edge, or I can click the first one, hold control, double click the second one, and it'll go all the way around. So again, now I'm going to use my chamfer settings. Now, because this is a bigger area, we probably want to dial those chamfer settings up a bit more to actually get a rounded part on the garbage can. But you can start to see, I don't know, I think that looks really cool. It's just the garbage cans are round on the bottom. So that's a nice rounded off garbage can. We could play with that even a bit more. I mean, you could really round it up, but we want to keep it somewhat realistic looking. We can play with extra segments, but I'm good with that. So that's going to start to get you a rounded garbage can on the bottom. Now, your next step, and I'm almost done talking here, your next step is to repeat what you did here over on this side. Line it up, figure out roughly what's straight across from it, and repeat it again. Is there a shortcut to doing that? Yes, absolutely. There, if you get into animation later on in a higher level course, we would use a different way. We would only do it one time. But one, it's good practice, and two, we don't want to confuse you and make it too complicated and turn you off of modeling. So we're going to just let you do it a second time, exact same way you did the handle. If you forget, you can always rewind this video and follow it through on the other side. Once you get that done, you probably want to chamfer this edge. This edge looks really good once it's chamfered, but again, make sure you've got that handle in before you chamfer it. I'll show you what that looks like with a chamfer on it. That one doesn't need quite as much as the bottom, but just a nice chamfered lip on there. You can then chamfer, once you got the second handle in, you can chamfer this guy here. Put a little bit of chamfer on that, and again, it sort of just rounds it off. It helps make it look better. Now, this is the basics of making a garbage can. If you follow through and you make the basics of a garbage can, you're going to get a decent but fairly basic mark. You'll notice I haven't done any of these indents, which to be honest are tricky to do. But I think between extrude and chamfer and a few other things like that, I think you could probably make something that looks cool. And you got to make the garbage can lid. So for the garbage can lid, I'm going to leave that up to you. You've got the skills now to do it. My recommendation would be starting with kind of like what we did. I'd start with a small cylinder with an end cap on top. You could definitely look at extruding something up, then maybe making a selection across and extruding that up also, extruding out this garbage can handle part here. There's all sorts of stuff you can do. You'll notice I didn't make this hollowed out part here, but you could absolutely go in there and play around with the skills that you have using extrude and using connect and things like that. You could absolutely extrude that down to give you sort of a hollowed out look for, oh, not that much. Hollowed out look for the garbage can handle. So thank you for listening to this video on how to make a basic garbage can in 3D Studio Max. Good luck.